Om Bhurabhuvah Svah Tatsaviturvarinyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yunah Prachodaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaskar, my dear friends. This is video number 16 on Panchadasi of Swami Vidyarnaya Bharti Tirtha. This video starts with part 2 of chapter 11. Topic is non-dual bliss. The Brahma is of the nature of bliss is clearly taught in the episode of Bhargo in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Bhargo approached his father Varuna with a burning desire to know Brahma and got a formula, the application of which has to be worked out by himself, from which all these beings arise, by which those that are born live, and into which dying they enter, know that to be Brahma. This is the general enunciation with the help of which Bhargo had to find out the nature of Brahma. Through enquiry, he decided that gross matter, vital airs, mind and intellect cannot satisfy the conditions of the formula, and finally arrived at the truth that Brahma is bliss, the prototype of the reflections found in the sheath of bliss. From bliss indeed all creatures come into being, in bliss they live, and unto bliss they return. Hence bliss is Brahma. Bhargo solved in this manner the fundamental problem of metaphysics. He was given by his father the qualification per accidens of Brahma, and with the help of this qualification he discovered the essential nature of Brahma, which bliss, Ananda, which is inseparable from reality and intelligence. If Brahma be of the nature of bliss, it must be the only reality without a second, and it must also be self-luminous. The Chandogya Upanishad reports a conversation between Narada and Sanata Kumara, where the latter instruct the former about the nature of the infinite Bhuma, which is Brahma. Prior to the creation of the world, there was the infinite alone, since there were not the threefold distinctions of empirical uses with the cognition, the thing cognized, and cognition. That is the infinite wherein nothing else is pursued, nothing else is heard, and nothing else is cognized. The seat of the intellect, which is a product, is the cognizer. The seat of the mind constitutes cognition, and the object of sense, sound, etc., are the objects of cognition. These verily did not exist prior to their production. Hence, the infinite alone existed with nothing else as opposed to itself. The infinite, which is the full, Purna, is experienced in the states of sleep, samadhi, and swoon. Wherever there is the absence of empirical distinction, there the non-dual self alone remains. The prior to creation, the non-dual infinite alone existed must be admitted because of the unintelligibility of the other alternatives. There could not have been then something which was neither dual nor non-dual, for such a thing is impossible, being self-contradictory. Nor could there have been the dual things, since they were not yet produced. Hence, by elimination, we must admit that the infinite alone existed. It cannot be said that the non-dual is established by reasoning and not by experience. Reasoning alone cannot establish the non-dual because there is no illustration. It may be syllogistically argued thus. The state of dissolution is devoid of duality since there is no apprehension of duality as in the state of sleep. Here, the sleep experienced by another person cannot be the illustration. The inference the other person is sleeping because he is without activity, like me when sleeping, establishes the self-luminosity of the experience of sleep. Hence, it is experience that makes known the reality of the non-dual. That which is non-dual and self-luminous, we have said, is bliss. That which is the infinite, Bhuma, is bliss. There is no happiness in the finite, Alpa. The object of sense yield no unmixed happiness. Even the little pleasure that they seem to yield is shrouded in misery and pain. And so Sanat Kumara declares that there is no happiness in the finite. Part 3 of chapter 11. Topic: Evidence of sleep experience. Now, let there be no happiness in duality, but how is there happiness in the non dual? If there were happiness, it would be apprehended, and if it were apprehended, there would be the empirical distinctions again which would negate the non dual. If thus it be said, the reply is let there be no bliss in the non dual because the non dual itself is bliss. Nor does this fact require any evidence, for in respect of the self luminous, no evidence is needed that the infinite non dual Brahma is self luminous is evident from the experience of sleep. In sleep, there is not the functioning of the senses, nor can that experience be established through inference from the sleep of another person. Means of valid knowledge like perception and inference are not able to establish the experience of sleep, but still we cannot but testify to the fact of such an experience, and hence it is self-luminous. The experience of sleep, which reveals the self to be non-dual and self-luminous, indicates also that it is of the nature of bliss. In sleep there is no misery, no pain, hence there remains in that state happiness or bliss. Scripture declares crossing the band of experiences of waking and dream, which the conceit in the body, the Purusha, though blind, becomes one who is not blind, though wounded, becomes one who is not wounded, though suffering from disease, becomes one who is free from disease. The following inference establishes the self-luminosity of the experience of sleep. What is in dispute with the experience of sleep is self-luminous because it is manifest even without the means of knowledge, like the self admitted by the Sankhyas or the Samvedana of the Prabhakaras or the cognition self of the Vijnanabadinj. The non-existence of misery in sleep is testified to in many other passages of the Upanishads. Nor may it be said, by quoting the example of an inert object like the stone, that mere absence of pain does not guarantee the presence of happiness. In the case of stone, etc., there cannot even be the suspicion of misery or pain, and hence also happiness. We do not infer the existence of happiness because of the non-existence of misery in the case of inert things. But in the case of beings which are subject to happiness and misery, we can say that when one of them is non-existent, the other is present. Further, the non-existence or existence of misery or pain in the self is directly experienced, not inferred. Since in sleep the non-existence of misery is experienced, we say that there is in that state the presence of happiness. If there were no happiness in sleep, why should man prepare their beds smooth and soft? Comfortable beds are not intended merely for the removal of pain, for if that were so, only those who are suffering from such pains are caused by disease, etc., should need them. The happiness that is afforded by soft beds, etc., is no doubt external and intrinsic. Tired of its avocations, the jiva seeks happiness in such objects of enjoyment as bed, etc. It experiences the reflection of its own bliss in the mode of the intellect. This is what is known as Visyananda, and it is not completely free from misery. It is only the semblance of bliss, and the semblance cannot be a substitute for the substance. In sleep, there is the experience of happiness, which is not the product of anything else. Scripture declares that the jiva in sleep experiences its identity with Brahma and the bliss thereof. By means of five examples, they indicate what the Brahma bliss experienced in sleep is like. Just as a bird which is tied by means of a thread flies in vain to various places in search of rest and returns at last to the abode to which it is bound, even so, the mind, which is the adjunct of the jiva, roams about in waking and dream in order to reap the fruits of its merit and demerit. And when its karma perishes, it gets dissolved in its material cause, viz. Nescience, and when the mind ceases to function, the jiva becomes one with the Supreme. Just as a falcon wings its way in the sky, gets exhausted and returns to its nest, even so the jiva runs to the experience of sleep, longing for Brahma bliss, like a suckling child which is free from attachment and aversion, or like an emperor who has reached the highest limit of human happiness, or like a knower of Brahma, learned in the sacred Lord who is at the helm of the happiness of knowledge. The jiva experiences an alloyed bliss in the state of sleep. Of all the persons in the world, only the infant, the emperor, and the enlightened can be said to be happy, and so they were cited as illustrations of the bliss experienced in sleep. The Shruti compares the Brahma bliss that is experienced in sleep to the happiness which is a person experiences in company with his consort. In both the kinds of experience, there is not the cognition of the object which belongs to the external and the internal worlds. Such passages of scripture which declare that in sleep a father becomes a non-father, etc., show that the jiva loses its jivahood and hence also its transmigratory nature. And when jivatva is removed in sleep, Brahma alone remains. The conceit in the body is the root cause of all the sorrows of life. Since that conceit is non-existent in sleep, the jiva is said to have transcended misery and pain. The Kavalla Upanishad says, during the time of sleep, when everything is dissolved, the jiva which is obscured by tamas attains the nature of happiness. Scripture is not the only evidence for the existence of happiness in sleep. There is also the testimony of experience of all who say, after waking up from sleep, happily did we sleep. We knew nothing in our sleep. Thus, there is the reflective cognition of happiness and nescience, which were experienced in sleep. Reflective cognition is grounded in experience, for without the latter, the former is not possible. Nor may it be said that since in sleep there are no recognized means of knowledge, there can be no experience of happiness and nescience. As it was pointed out already, the experience of happiness in sleep, which is no other than Brahma bliss, requires no instrument of knowledge because it is self-luminous, and nescience is revealed by Brahma, which is so doing is not in need of any external channels of cognition. That the self-luminous bliss experienced in sleep is Brahma is declared by the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad in the passage Brahma is intelligence bliss. Granting that the bliss experienced in sleep is Brahma, a question may be asked here as to who experiences the bliss. The jiva, which has the intellect for adjunct, remembers that it slept happily without knowing anything. Since experience and the recognition thereof must have the same locus, the jiva conditioned by the intellect must have experienced happiness and nescience in sleep. This statement is not valid, for in sleep the intellect and the mind, which are the products of nescience, get resolved in their cause, and since the adjunct, the intellect, is non-existent, there cannot be the jiva as conditioned by intellect. What experiences happiness and nescience in sleep is the Anandmaya self, and the remembrance of that by the Vidyarnaya self is intelligible because the self is the same in both the states of experience, although the adjuncts may vary. In the moment immediately antecedent to Antecedent to sleep, there is the mode of the intellect which is turned inward and wherein there is the reflection of bliss, and later the same mode along with the reflection of bliss gets resolved in the form of sleep and comes to be called Anandamaya. Anandamaya self has for its adjunct nescience, which is associated with the residual impression generated by the inward turn mode of the intellect, and it experiences in sleep Brahma bliss, which is its true nature by means of the mode generated by nescience. In sleep, there is not the conceit, I am experiencing happiness, etc., because the modes of nescience, unlike the modes of intellect, are subtle and not clearly manifest. The Upanishads, like the Mandukya and the Tapanya, set forth that the Anandmaya enjoys Brahma bliss by means of the subtle modes of nescience. The mass of intelligence which has become one in the state of sleep is the Anandamaya, which enjoys bliss through the channel of modes possessing reflection of intelligence. The self, which assumes many forms in the states of waking and dream, becomes of a single consistency in sleep, and the intelligence which is reflected in essence serves as the channel for the enjoyment of bliss. Again, due to the force of karma, the jiva awakes from sleep and gets involved in the troubles and turmoils of the transmigratory life. The Kaivalya Upanishad says that the awaking from sleep is caused by karma. Again, due to conjunction with the karma of the previous life, the same jiva dreams and awakes. An examination of the moment immediately succeeding the termination of sleep gives us intimation of the Brahma bliss experience during sleep. For there is then the persistence of residual impressions of Brahma bliss, which is born out of by the fact that a person who has just got up from sleep remains calm and happy without any thought of external objects. But being prompted by karma, the jiva loses sort of its blissful nature and gets entangled once again in the vicious circle of samsara. We observed above that in the state of calmness there is the manifestation of Brahma bliss in the form of residual impression. Now, since the manifestation of Brahma bliss is obtained in the state of calmness, the need for the teaching of scripture and the preceptor may be questioned. The declarations of Shruti can be meaningful only when it connotes something which is not established by any other means. This objection is not sound. A man who does not know a piece of precious stone to be such finds no use for it. Even so, although everyone experiences Brahma bliss in sleep and its residual impression in the state of calmness, he does not recognize it to be Brahma bliss or the residual impression thereof without the help of scripture and the preceptor. Nor may the opponent say that he has understood Brahma from the words of the Siddhantin, for it is analogous to the instance of the man who hoped to win the prize for proficiency in the Vedas by merely saying that the Vedas are four in number. Even if the words which constitute such statements as you are the impartite non-dual Brahma bliss, etc. be mastered and their meaning learned. There remains to be acquired the intuition of Brahma, and this intuition can be got only through the declarations of scriptures and the instructions of the preceptor. So far we have seen how there is the experience of Brahma bliss in the state of sleep, how it is self-luminous and non-dual, as also how there is the indication of the bliss immediately prior to sleep and an intimation thereof in the form of residual impression immediately subsequent to sleep. The happiness which is the result of the residual impression of bliss is experienced whenever there is happiness which is not due to the objects of external world. This is what we have called Vasanananda. What is known as Visyananda is the reflection of bliss in the mental mode which has turned inward after the desire for external objects is destroyed through attaining them. As was remarked above, the latter two kinds of bliss are but products of Brahma bliss, Vasana Ananda being its residual impression and Visyananda being its reflection in the modes which cognizes objects of sense. Both the latter kinds of bliss point towards their generator, that is Brahma bliss. So this video concludes here, and next video number 17 will start with part 4 of chapter 11, and topic will be residual impressions of bliss. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar, my dear friends. Namaskar.